Hey guys, I'm going to go over the integumentary system and integumentary system lab particularly today. So integumentary system is all about the skin and the accessory organs of the skin, which contains some internal organs and some other associated organ. So if you take any cut section of an skin slide, you're going to see skin has three layers. The outermost layer is called epidermis. Middle layer is called dermis, which has two main layers. Very thin upper layer is called papillary layer. And then thick layer of the dermis is called reticular layer. And then there is hypodermis. Hypodermis is filled with uh, all the fat and blood vessels and other connective tissues. Hypodermis is also called superficial fascia. Okay, so let's see in detail. Epidermis is made up of stratified squamous epithelium, and then dermis interdigitate with epidermis, and that's how there is like finger-like projection of the dermis with the epidermis, and this finger-like projection of the epidermis is called dermal papilla. So the finger-like projection of this the dermis, which is called dermal papilla, interdigitate with the epidermis. You can see. Okay. Uh, as you know, epidermis is epithelial tissue, so it has no blood vessels. That's why there is papillary layer of the dermis, which is made of areolar connective tissue, and that supply nutrition and oxygen and other nutrients to the epidermis. Uh, in the dermis, you will see several other structures. Papillary layer, reticular layer again. Papillary layer is regular, dense, regular connective tissue, sorry, areolar connective tissue. And reticular layer is dense, irregular connective tissue. In the histology section of this reticular layer, we're going to see how the dense, regular, irregular connective tissue contains the collagen fibers, which are in different direction. So in the skin, we have appendages of the skin. Okay, means the organs of the skin. That's why skin is called a system, integumentary system. It has several organs, like you have erector pili muscles, then you have sebaceous or whale gland. We have here coiled eccrine sweat gland. Then we have hair follicle, and then hair root, nerve fibers. And then there is several other nervous structures, like we have Meissner's corpuscles, you see the nerve fiber, and then on the head of nerve fiber, there is nerve, and then nerve is covered by connective tissue. Then Pacinian corpuscles, which are nerve fiber, and then several lamellar layers of connective tissue like layer, and then sensory nerve endings, hair follicles, receptors. On the hair, there is a root of the hair, and this is the shaft of the hair. On the side of the root of the hair, you can see there is whale glands. It is like nest attached to the hair root. You can see the cut section of sebaceous gland here. You can see coiled sweat glands, which comes all the way and open through the pore on the skin. Another sweat gland is here. Attached to the hair follicle, there is a muscle called erector pili muscle. Singular is pilus, plural is pili. This muscle starts from the hair follicle and then goes all the way to the dermis. This is a smooth muscle in the skin. Here is another erector pili muscle, you can see. So this is the basic structure of the skin. Now we're going to see the models of the skin, and then we will go over the histology slide from our practice anatomy lab PAL 3.1. Okay. So as usual, go to your study area in the PAL and then start anatomy practice lab. In the anatomy practice lab, click on. And then you will see the anatomical models, which is for the integumentary system. And I'm going to stop and I'm going to screen share again. So I'm sure that I have shared a screen. Okay, so here in this model, you see this is the skin model. As I said earlier, in the introductory slide, this is the epidermis. And on top of epidermis, you see there is a thick layer, this layer that is called the keratin layer of the skin, because thick layers have keratin layer. I can show the layers here. So this is the epidermis with keratin layer. And this is then from here to here, this all dermis. The reticular layer of the dermis, you can see, and you can see very thin the papillary layer of the dermis. You see, papillary layer of the dermis. The reticular layer of the dermis is the way thicker than the papillary layer of the dermis. And then the thick layer is here, hypodermis. Now you can see all the appendages which we talked about earlier. So what are they? You have here sapt, and then you have here root here. On the root, we have sebaceous gland. Then we have the eccrine sweat glands. Here, this white tube. 1, 2, 3. Here is one. Sudoriferous gland is another name for eccrine sweat glands. So you can see several sweat glands. This is the cut section, and here you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have the sebaceous gland, Meissner's corpuscles. Meissner's corpuscles are touch receptors. Pacinian corpuscles, they are pressure receptors. And then hypodermis contains most of the fat under our skin. Okay, so this is the models for the skin. Here it's slightly more magnified, thick skin. You can see this is the stratum corneum. The outermost layer of the epidermis is stratum corneum. Then you have second layer called stratum lucidium. Then stratum granulosum. Then stratum spinosum. And the last layer is called stratum basale. Okay. I used to call mnemonics for these all layers, and you can write it. California-like girls in string bikini. So for California, it is stratum corneum, C for California. Like girls, like is lucidium, girls is granulosum, string is S, spinosum, and bikini is B, vishal. So if you say California like girls in a string, bikini, it is funny, but you're gonna remember all the layers of the epidermis easily. So we are talking about the layers of the epidermis. Skin has 3 layers: hypodermis, dermis, and epidermis. And epidermis has these 5 layers. Okay. Other structure you can see there is a Meissner's corpuscles, and then there is a lot of blood vessels, papillary dermis, and a lot of blood vessels. Okay. This is the reticular layer. So this is the model. Now we're going to go, and in practice anatomy, we're going to talk about the histology of the skin. So let's talk about histology of the integumentary system. And here you're going to repeat a lot of histology, which you have done in chapter 4. So I'm going to show here. So this is a skin, thick skin longitudinal section. You see, the outermost layer is epidermis. Just hold your video, pause your video for a second, and ask yourself, what kind of tissue epidermis is made up of? Okay. The next layer is dermis. It has 2 layers. The upper thin layer is areolar connective tissue, and most of the thick layer is reticular connective tissue. And then you can see hypodermis, which is full of adipose tissue, blood vessels, and other stuff. You can see the level again, all the levels. And in the cut section, apart from these 3 layers, you can see there is blood vessels, there is eccrine sweat glands, and Pacinian corpuscles transverse section. You see, there's a nerve fiber in the center, and then circle of matrix, and then fats. This is hypodermis. Another thick skin longitudinal section. You can see epidermis, papillary layer, reticular layer, and then eccrine. Eccrine ducts means eccrine sweat gland ducts. The blood vessels, you can see here one, here another, and then collagen fibers. So you see, let's see, if you see in the reticular layers of the dermis, you can see these pink fibers. All the pink lines are fibers. Okay, those pink lines are fibers. And you can see these all fibers are in different direction. It is like haphazard, irregular direction. That's why we call reticular layer of the dermis is dense, irregular connective tissue. This is even further magnified, thick skin dermis and hypodermis with longitudinal section. And you can see the collagen fibers. You can click on the word and it brings your sound too. Okay. So here you can see the, again, Pacinian corpuscles, collagen fibers, eccrine sweat glands, eccrine sweat gland. So this is longitude. Here in this diagram, you can see this is the longitudinal section. Here is transverse section. Here is blood vessel again. This is a Pacinian corpuscles, fat cells here. And here is hypodermis. Same all layers here again. Stratum corneum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum. Earlier we saw this in diagram model. and then reticular layer of connective tissue. So this is the stratum basal layer. These all layers, slowly stratum basal layers of the cells. You can see the nuclei, the pink nuclei, and they slowly goes and dies and becomes the stratum corneum. Once they die, the basal layer multiply and supply the dead cells and replenish them. This is the reticular layer of the dermis with all the pink collagen fibers. You can see they are in irregular fashions. And the main cells in the dense irregular connective tissue is fibroblast. And you see the fibroblast nuclei, these all. And then you have sweat glands. So you see stratified cuboidal epithelium of the sweat glands, eccrine duct, eccrine sweat gland duct. Here is again, this is the thick skin. See the keratin layer and then a stratified squamous epithelium with keratin. So we call it keratinized. And then you see the papilla. This is the basement membrane. And then inside the basement membrane, this is the papilla of the dermis, you see? Finger-like projection of the dermis, which interdigitate with the finger-like projection of the epidermis. It's a thick skin, sweat glands in dermis, longitudinal section, magnified, and you can see ducts of sweat glands. They are stratified cuboidal epithelium. You can see 1, 2, 3, sometimes only 2. That's why we call them stratified cuboidal epitheliums. This is the thick skin Meissner's corpuscles. This is just under the epidermis, and you can see this is the stratum basal. And under the stratum basals, you have Meissner's corpuscles. Cut section here, which is the touch receptor. This is a Pacinian corpuscles longitudinal section, highly magnified. And you can see there is unmyelinated nerve fiber and then connective tissue layers like 3-ring structures. And when you touch something pressure, you feel pressure with this receptor. This is the thin skin, like our body skin with hair follicle longitudinal section. So you can see these are the hair follicles. And then hair is coming up. So you can see these all are the hair follicle too, these one. And in the center white, those are the shaft of the hair. And then you can see sweat glands, erector pili muscles, which is attached to the hair shaft. Then you have sebaceous gland. And the rest of the things are dermis and hypodermis. Epidermis is here. Thin hair follicle longitudinal section, and again magnified, so you can see the follicular wall, because hair is covered by connective tissue outside. So this is follicular wall, and the shaft of the hair is in the center. And then you can see sebaceous gland and the erector pili muscle attached to it, and then eccrine sweat gland. And here is epidermis. Similarly, thick skin again, the longitudinal section of the hair follicles inside your skin. So you have papilla of the hair, and then matrix. Matrix is made up of a lot of the cells, stratified squamous-like cells. Then they make keratin, and those keratin come up. Then they die and become your hair. Okay. And this is the follicles which holds your hair root. So when you pluck hair, and if somebody plucks hair and if you take these all, the papilla and the root of the hair is lost, that hair never gonna grow again. Again, it's a highly magnified. You have a follicle wall and surrounded by epidermis, the dermis. So there is fat around it. So this is the hair root. You have a matrix, the papilla, and then this is the follicular wall. Okay. This is the transverse section, hair follicle cross section or transverse section. So when you see what are the layers, in the center you have real hair here, hair shaft. This is surrounded by internal root sheath, and then you have external root sheath, and these all layers are attached to your skin in the dermis through the connective tissue root sheath. Okay, same thing here. Here is the skin slide again with the hair root and hair follicle, sebaceous gland attached to it, another sebaceous gland here, and the collagen fibers in the dermis and the epidermis. This is a thin skin longitudinal section to show the sebaceous or whale gland. So whale gland and erector pili muscle both are pretty much attached to the hair follicle. So here we should be somewhere hair follicle, and you can see the sebaceous gland. They make sebum, whale. That makes sebum from the sebaceous gland, sometimes called natural shampoo, conditioner, because it makes your skin soft and pliable. This is the thin longitudinal section again. You have the stratified squamous epithelium. You can see the flaky keratin layer like a structure here, and then basement membrane. And then you have dense irregular connective tissue of the dermis. Okay, so that is all in the lab section of the integumentary system. And later I'm going to post your homework and practice for this section. Okay, so I will suggest go over it in the histology slide and model and practice the slides. At the same time, before you do this, read the text, read PowerPoints, follow the study guidelines, and use it. Okay, thank you.